Hey, everybody, it's Brett, and welcome back to another episode of Behind the Stack, where today I am sitting down with author Jemimah Way to discuss her new book, The Original Daughter. The Original Daughter is this month's Good Morning America book club pick. It's also a New York Times editor's pick and an Indie Next pick. It debuted at #1 on the Straits Times bestseller list and has been named a Best Book of Spring 2025 by Harper's Bazaar, Elle, Vogue, Time, Apple Books, and more. A little bit about Jemimah. She is a 2025 National Book Foundation 535 honoree, a 2022 for Stegner Fellow at Stanford University, a 2020 Philippe P. D'Alba Fellow at Columbia University, and a Francine Ringgold Award for New Writers honoree. Her fiction has won the William Van Dyke Short Story Prize and has been published in Narrative, Guernica, and Joyland, amongst others. She has been nominated for the Pushcart Prize, recognized by the Best of the Net anthologies, and received scholarships from Singapore's National Arts Council, Bread Loaf Writers Conference, Swanee Writers Conference, and Columbia University, where she earned her MFA. She is currently a senior prose editor at the Massachusetts Review, and she splits her time between Singapore and New York City. So please enjoy this episode of Behind the Stack. So I am so thrilled to be sitting down with Jemimah Way today, whose brand new book. I'm sorry, I don't have the finished cover because this is a galley copy of The Original Daughter, but you can probably, maybe you have a copy in front of you that you could share. And there we go. There we go. So yeah, oh, oh my God, I'm afraid I'm gonna get emotional. It was so beautiful and just an incredible book. And it surprised me in so many ways. And I had no idea what I was getting into. And so congratulations. It's absolutely stunning.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on the show, Brad. And also, I love seeing all the post-its flagging out of your book. And well, it's very meaningful to me to hear readers, hear that the book resonates with readers because I've been alone with this book for so long that see it kind of doing her own thing in the world and meeting readers on their own terms is really incredible to me. So thank you so much for your kind words.
No, it's such a cool thing because I've always, I have this conversation with writers a lot because you've spent so much time, it's like with your baby, right? And that's your thing. And suddenly to put it out in the world, like you said, meeting readers on their own terms, but it becomes a life of its own and it's such a different experience. And so I can't help but think it's exciting, but it's also a little scary, um, just to watch it launch off. But God. So usually I have to tell you when I start my episodes, I always, give a bio and talk about the author. But some of it I thought today I had to do it in front of you because I was so blown away. And like I said before we started recording, I really went down this Jemimah wormhole, which was really fun. And I was watching interviews and I was watching some of your acting and as well as just reading a lot of your stuff. But first of all, I have to tell you that Den Michelle Norris was on a few weeks ago, and I reached out to her this week and I said, Jemima's coming on this week. And she was like, I'm so obsessed with her. I am so obsessed with her. And now I really wish, because I'm in LA, that I would really wish I would have seen the panel with the both of you
Oh, I
at
love that,
AWP.
Michelle. Yeah.
Yeah. So so if your ears were burning, she was speaking very highly of you. But you were the first Singaporean to be awarded the Stegner Fellowship. And for anyone who doesn't know, the Stegner Fellowship is awarded annually to 5 poets and 5 fiction writers. And the fellowships include a stipend and working with artists who meet weekly for workshops with the faculty of Stanford's writing program. And I love this quote from them. Again, it just speaks so highly to you and your work. In awarding fellowships, we consider the quality of the candidate's creative work, potential for growth, and ability to contribute to and profit from our writing workshops. Um, so congratulations on that, which I'm
Thank
sure
you.
was just an incredible experience.
Yeah.
Um, you were also recently named by the National Book Foundation, one of their 5 under 35, for this book, and for the National Book Foundation, for these, it says they award this to a works of fiction that promises to leave a lasting impression on the literary landscape. So amazing. It's also been chosen as a May Indie Next title, so congratulations on that as well. Um, I want to go back before we get into the book and just ask you. So you always wanted to be a writer? Did you always know you wanted to be a writer?
Yeah, but my definition of that was a little different, I think, from most people I've spoken to, because it's not that I don't have imposter syndrome, I do have that. But growing up in Singapore, just like the idea of being an author was so far away that it just didn't seem within the realm of possibility. So I was never plagued by the, oh, can I write? Because to me, writing is an action word. You're a writer because you write. It's just like, it's supposed to sit
Right.
down. It doesn't feel like married to the reality of publishing for me. Only after I, had been writing for a long time by myself in Singapore and then took the jump, I think, to come to the US, did I start thinking about, can I be a published author? So those are two different things. But since I was young, I just have always remembered making things up, like, and writing them down, and kind of lying awake at night inventing what story I'm gonna act out the next day, and then harassing my poor parents because I would then wake up and I'm like, I'm this character now, and they're like, oh, here we go again.
Yeah, you once said that when you found out about the fellowship, that it was just such an affirmation for you as a Singaporean girl who grew up being told that writing is an impractical child's dream.
Yeah.
Um, and I love that. I love the universality of that, because I feel like any kind of artist, any kind of person who, whether it's writing or acting or music, there is that kind of thing that you're met with of well, that's fine, but what are you going to do to make money? And, what are you going to do to support yourself? Like, this is great as a hobby. This is great as something to see it put into action. So I know that you went to Columbia for your MFA, but bridge the gap for me. Like,
hmm
how did you get up to there? And I also have to ask, are you an only child?
No, I have two younger sisters.
Oh wow, are you guys close?
Yeah, very close.
That's
Which is
so.
fun. It's so fun because everybody keeps asking me. They're like, "Oh, what's like, because this
What's
book
the
is a book
tea?
about, yeah, exactly. Everyone's like, what's a tea? And it's really hilarious to me because I wasn't thinking as much about sisters as much as I was about, I mean, I was thinking about sisters, but also about the idea of a child that's given away and who enters a family kind of not from birth, but a little way down the road. And so the relationship to me is not quite the same as my relationship with my sisters. And whenever people are asking me about, oh, like, is that correlation? I always joke that because I have two younger sisters, and in the book it's just two sisters. I'm like, I'm gonna lock my two sisters in a room and let them duke it out by the title of OG.
What is the spread, like age spread?
Oh, the next sister is 3 years younger than me, and my baby is 7 years younger than me. Yeah,
Wow.
we're close. We grew up together, and we were like living together very tightly right up till I moved to the States. So up to adulthood and even up to now, we're like always chatting. We do kind of like now we're all in different places, but we do try and arrange our years and our time around like trying to be there for each other's big moments because it's difficult because now I'm in the States. One of my sisters was in Australia for a long time. The other one works a job that makes her travel a lot. And so we do have to like be more intentional about trying to spend that time together. But I'm really grateful to technology because we're always yapping on like Telegram. And this is something I feel strongly as an international writer, right? Because no matter where I am in the moment, I'm saying bye to somebody. I have great,
Mm.
great friends in New York. I have a very strong community in Singapore, and I love a lot of my friends in the Bay Area. So every time I move, I feel like I am putting down roots and then saying goodbye, putting down roots and then saying goodbye. And so my relationship to technology, I think, in terms of how grateful I feel for the ability to communicate and stay in people's lives, is quite like deep. I feel very, very, very thankful for technology.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of the gifts of modern life, right? Because I always feel like social media to me is its own thing, and I want to talk a little bit about that a little later in
Mhm.
regards to the book as well.
I do feel like people are always asking me for this like black or white answer when they say, "What do you think about technology?" And I'm like, what is there to think about it? It's here, it's in our lives. Or people will be like, "What do you feel about social media and is it good for us?" And I'm like, well, there it's not a yes or no answer.
Okay, because we're starting to dip in. So before we dip in,
Sure,
because
sure.
I know we're starting to dip in. Do you have like an elevator pitch for the book?
The original daughter follows two sisters, one adopted, growing up the rapidly modernizing, super stressful and ultra competitive Singapore, navigating their relationship to, independence and intimacy on their journey to fame and fortune. What happens then is, where I come from, being really close to somebody means that you're all up in their business, even if it makes you want to die. And so these sisters and this family have to navigate their relationship to love and boundaries, even when society and everything in the world seems to be designed to push them into a more individualistic path. And so I guess you just have to read the book to find out how that plays out.
Yes, you do. You had an MFA in Columbia, but what happened before that? Like in terms of schooling and what happened to get you there? Um, what was that about? And I have something I want to ask you first. Try to interject that. How often do you go back to Singapore?
Oh, super often.
All the time?
Well, I try to as much as possible because, like I said earlier, my relationships are very important to me, and I feel like I have developed this great ambition for love in the last couple of decades. And what that means to me is trying to be there for like my friends and family in person whenever I can. And that sometimes seems a little counterintuitive to the writer's life because so much of writing is
Mm.
solitary. But and then also Singapore and New York are famously like the longest flight in the world, right? So I'm perpetually jet lagged. I'm always tired because it's always it's always like 2 a.m. somewhere. But it is I think the tax I am willing to pay on being like having those like rich and strong relationships and being able to do that for as long as I can. Obviously, like practical considerations, like financial considerations and time zone considerations come into play. And so I don't know how long I'll be able to sustain this, but for as long as I can, I do want to be able to be quite invested in both my life in the States and Singapore. In fact, I was talking because it's something that's been troubling me for a long time. Like, where do I set down roots and like make a home? And I was talking to Cheng Ray Lee at the Stagnum,
Mm.
and he was like, "I'm a novelist. I don't really have a place on base because as a writer, you go wherever the writing calls you. Like, and that's realistic, right? I would have never thought I would move to the Bay Area, but the Stagnum was like, we will have you come. And I was like, I will come. So, if anyone listening to this podcast, like wants to host a writer for a fellowship for a year or two, please ping me. I'm open.
Right. And make it an incredible location, by the way.
Oh yeah, I mean, totally. So I think that really opened things up for me because I was like, it is true. Why am I thinking already when you choose to be a writer, you are divorcing yourself from a kind of standardized path, right? You're divorcing yourself from any kind of traditional markers of success or timeline or anything like that. And so then why keep to those traditional markers in every other part of your life? Like you have already chosen a path that's slightly different. And so Chiang Rei's conversation with me really made me think, okay, maybe I don't have to be like saying yes to one means saying no to another. Maybe I can try to like, be there for both parts of my life for as long as I can. And so that's what I'm trying to do for now. Yeah.
I also this time now I'm going to sound like I'm going to sound like parental, and I don't mean it to come off that way, but I'm like
Mhm.
you're young enough to be able to do this right now too.
Yes.
And I find that sometimes with age becomes longing for something different, and you might find, listen, this is, I feel like this is the launch off, right? This is the
hmm
moment when your rocket is taking off in such an incredible way, and the journey of where it's going to take you, who knows? But I do find a lot of times as people begin to age, there becomes this longing for what was familiar and what was known, and sometimes to go back to what we knew. Um, it's just an interesting thing, and I've found that a lot, or a representation of what we knew, if that makes
hmm
sense.
I
So
definitely
you'll
get
have.
that. I do expect that that will happen in the years moving forward. But I think something that I've really tried to hold on to throughout this entire process of launching a book is I don't want to wake up one day, maybe 10 years down the road, and be like, those were the good days. I want to be like, this is a good day. I want to recognize what I have when I have it. And as you said, I'm young, like famously under 35. And so I
Yeah,
can do this
yeah,
now. I can, my body can take it. It's just, I am like, it is tiring. And, um, I have like, I don't have that many commitments where I am, like tied to a
tied
place.
down.
I don't have kids. I don't have, so because of that, I do feel like for as long as I can keep it going, I would like the privilege of being there for my communities on both sides. And I think also, that if you zoom out a little bit, I do think to myself, growing up, what examples did I have? Not that many. And so it's not just my friends and family. I feel very invested in going back and being there for the burgeoning artist community in Singapore, the writers, emerging writers. Like I'm a mentor with the Singapore Book Council. I try to do master classes and as many things as I can every time I'm back in Singapore because there is a huge growing artist community there of writers, fiction writers, in a way that's very exciting to me. And I think that it can be very difficult for somebody from like an international writer to understand what publishing looks like or understand what it looks like to launch a book or what it looks like to build an artist's career in a sustainable way. And so I do feel invested in that. I don't want to just be like, okay, this is like just my life and I'm leaving. Um, so I think that's part of why I do feel quite drawn to going back often.
Yeah, yeah. No, I get it. Um, so much of the book is really it's about ambition for both these sisters, Genevieve Yang, and now do you pronounce it Erin or Arin, or how do you pronounce her name?
Oh, I pronounce it Erin.
Erin. It's Arin for our
Mm-hmm.
listeners and viewers, but ambition in very different ways, right? And Jen's, I would love to talk about this because I'm personally unfamiliar with it, but there's this whole, the academic ambition, right? And this is the whole culturally, like in Singapore, can you talk a little bit about, because I'm sure you went through this
Mm-hmm.
yourself, just what that culture is like
Mm-hmm.
and what it was like for her. And she's incredibly driven to be the best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that links a little bit to earlier when you asked me to fill in the gaps, which I keep forgetting to do because I keep getting
That's okay. We
distracted.
kept getting distracted. Sorry. That's my fault.
No, it's also my fault. I'm a yapper.
I
But
am too.
yeah, so, I grew up in the Singaporean education system, as did my characters. It's extremely stressful because there is this idea that we are a really small country, right? And you have to be extremely excellent in order to survive on the global stage, which I think is something that, has proven itself to a certain extent, like over the last couple of decades with the different crises. Like Singapore's narrative has always been you have to be extremely excellent in order to survive because we have nothing else going for us. We're small, we have no natural resources. All we have is our smarts and our R&D and our ability to like be really good at navigating international waters. And so you grow up with that, like messaging all the time. And when you're growing up in Singapore, there are very few ways where you think to yourself, I can jump a class or like escape my circumstances. And one of that is this idea of like a meritocratic academic society where if you do extremely well, maybe you could get like a scholarship that could elevate you, that could then there are like very specific paths that you could really track back. And it's very common for young people to be like, all right, these are my dream schools, this is the way I'm going to get it, these are the scholarships and programs I want to get into, and therefore I'm going to like optimize every single part of my life so that I become the ultimate candidate for this. And so it's very common to go to school, go to like different kinds of tuition or enrichment classes, develop all kinds of very specific hobbies that could then get you into a school a different way. So instead of through results, you could get in through dragon boating or like singing or like band, by being like the best of everything that you can be. So the correlation to my personal life is I'm a bit of a nerd. Like I've always loved school. I don't have that like, oh, I don't want to go to school. I was like, oh wow, look at how fun this is. Every day I got to go hang out with my friends and learn new things. So no problem there. Nobody had to force me to go to school. But it was really stressful. And for me, I was really big on the idea of a backup plan. So I was terrified that I wouldn't do well in school because we are graded on a bell curve, which is something I talk very briefly about in the book, which means
Mm.
your grades are not an objective grade, they're a relative grade. So you get an A if you are the top like 10%. That's not a number grade. So I could get 99 upon 100 and still not get an A because, like everybody else got 100 upon 100. So that means that you're constantly in competition, and it is, I think, very at the forefront of a lot of students' minds. And so for me, I just developed like extremely niche hobbies. Like I was a soprano growing up, and I got into my junior college through singing. I was straight up like I auditioned outside of like my grades, and so I was a direct school admission student. So that if I didn't do well enough through pure O level results, I could get in through my voice, and that is what I did. I got in through my voice, and people do that through all kinds of ways. And for me, choosing choir was like the obvious choice because you don't need to buy an instrument. It's very cost efficient. You just need your voice. You have to like sing in the corner and train that all day long. So you have all this kind of like training. And the like golden standard is from that generation. You know, Singapore's a very young country. We are turning 60 this year. So it's like three generations of people. And the previous generations to this generation, everybody says the same thing: get yourself to university, because once you get there, once you have a college degree, you can get a job. Because that was true of a generation ago. It's not true anymore. Now everybody has a college degree, and it's so hard to get a job. The job market is so competitive. But growing up, you didn't think that. You just thought to yourself, it would be worse without a degree. So everybody's like busting their ass to get to college. And people have mental breakdowns. It's crazy. Like I know so many people who just did not survive the academic system, who either had like mental breakdowns or like, you know, just like took themselves out of the system, or worse. And so to me, that was always something that I don't think you could write a book about growing up in Singapore without touching on the educational system. Then, I mean, that would just be magical realism because they're not. Like, what Singaporean isn't stressed, you know? Like, that's like a fantasy. And so, yeah. So I was like, you know, this has to make it in. And it turned out to be very rich material for me. Um, but I think that sense of moving out of an institutionalized system is very, you know, unmooring and very destabilizing for a lot of people who are grown in this system. Because you grow with this trellis, right, of like grades and like rubrics and metrics. And then you exit into the real world and you're like, the real world doesn't give a shit. They're like, all right, you got like A for like, you know, math, good on you. So can you code this or not? And so a lot of people then become very disillusioned and kind of lost, and then existentially lost and depressed, and then the bills don't stop coming because once you're an adult, all the bills kick in, and then so
Sure.
you're like, okay, now you find a job, immediately I need to make decisions that are not really driven by the kind of life I want to lead, but driven by extremely pragmatic decisions because we are also like a very community-based society. You know, it's quite common to live at home until you get married. Or like, you know, it's not like in America where people tend to move out at 18 for college. And I think that's because we're a small country. Like there's no real need to move anywhere. Like you can get everywhere from one end of the country to the other, but like maximum 45 minutes by car. So where are you gonna go? You know, like rent is expensive, it's in high demand. And so,
What's the population?
well, I think we're like almost 6 million.
Wow.
Yeah, we're super overpopulated, which is why all buildings like grow upwards. So we have like very high buildings. Yeah, if you live in a house that just has one story, like a cartoon house, that's like a real sign of wealth because you didn't have to go upwards. Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
Interesting.
But not only is it like extremely overpopulated, right? It's a tiny society. And so there is a sense that you will want to care for your parents, like the aging generation. And so
Yeah.
you don't make decisions moving forward based on what you want anymore. You make it based on how can I support my family? How can I be the best person in my community as well? Um, I don't know, like at a young age, there can be a lot of self-inflicted and community-inflicted pressure that is not deliberate pressure, but it exists. It's like atmospheric pressure. And also, like, yeah, this is in the book as well, but because everybody knows everybody, you know, there's no 7 degree of separation in Singapore. It's like 2 degrees or 3 degrees.
Mm.
So there is a sense really that um there you can't make a misstep, because it's very hard to climb back on the bandwagon if you've fallen behind. And also that, you know, there's no true sense of total anonymity or privacy. And I think that is something that really shapes my character's decisions moving forward in different ways.
Well, and I'm thinking about their living arrangements because they live in this house with the parents and then their grandmother at the start of it. It's a very small area. And literally there's no privacy for any of them. I'm wondering, going back, do you feel that in terms of the school system, in terms of those pressures, but do you think that some of that's changed?
Yeah, I think they're trying to change. So the book starts in 1995. And I think back then it was like uh, really, really, really stressful, and there were repercussions, right? Like people, there were all these studies. I think there was this study, this like regional study was like Singaporeans are really unhappy, and then so the government got stressed, and they were like, we're unhappy, we're not unhappy, we're really happy actually, and then so they started
We're
implementing
so
all
happy.
these. We're so happy. We started implementing all these, like kind of mental health or like
It's like America now. We're so happy.
Oh, he's so happy. It's just joy every day. But
Joyous.
yeah, it's joy, joy, joy. But it's kind of like that. They did recognize that it's not sustainable for people to be constantly having like breakdowns of how stressed they are. And so there are all these things implemented to try and have like more rest, a more balanced lifestyle, or like to move away from grades, the grading system, to move away from awards. So when I like I mentioned earlier, I used to be a soprano. The competition for that, the highest award you get, you go with honors, and now they don't do that anymore. They just it's like it used to be bronze, silver, gold, gold with honors, and they don't do that anymore because they don't want to have like an award system tied to it. They moved it away from that. But I do think that unless there's like radical systemic change, people still are aware of those competitive elements, and the way they evaluate, who they take in for their internships, the way they take in who they take in for their jobs, still ends up coming down to like this sense of competency, which is very, very, very highly valued in Singapore. I do think we are kind of famous for it. It is the Singaporean brand. We're super efficient, super responsible, super productive, and just like super competent. And people aren't born that way. They're kind of like made that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and this is interesting because it segues almost into Erin in terms of
Mm-hmm.
born and made, because this trajectory of her character is so fascinating. Because this is not a spoiler, and we don't do spoilers on this, but it's not a spoiler in that she begins to become famous, ultimately as an actress, but in the beginning as a uh, personality, like a social media personality. Um, and this whole thing fascinated me. First of all, um, also, like, going into this, I have to back up with you a little bit, because as I was reading the book and then diving into you, and all of a sudden I was watching you, do something for Laneige, on one of your, a photography thing. So I wanted to ask you how that started for you in terms of like becoming involved in social media and capitalizing on it. You've done very well between your blog and doing this.
I was kind of scouted, and then I started doing a reality TV show. And this was like, I think, very, very early days of the internet, back when I think YouTube maybe wasn't like a massive thing. Yeah, I mean we were still flirting with the internet back then. It wasn't on YouTube. It was on like a different like TV network online, and later I made a transition to YouTube. And I did that for I want to say a good 8 years. So I think I know, yeah. So I specialized in travel and reality. And so I did that. For that network, I did a couple of travel shows. I moved into doing some producing and directing, writing scripts that I was interested in. And I do feel like that opened up a whole different life for me. And I had a really, I want to say, blessed experience. I was scouted by a woman. I had very strong female mentors. I immediately, when I started, was taken under the wing of some veteran kind of like personalities or TV hosts in Singapore. And so I kind of always felt protected and prepared going into this. And even then, it was challenging to suddenly be ultra perceived from a young age. And
Yeah.
I've always been extremely fascinated by this because I feel like back then there was a sense of potential and real like excitement around where this industry could go. There is this sense that to be like a traditional celebrity, to be an actress or like a theater actress or a TV actress, you need to have certain things in place. Right? You need to be extremely good looking or unique looking in a very polished way. You need to have certain things set up in life, and then to have like other kinds of careers, you need to have like privilege of background, of economic fluidity, of like certain like academic, you know, merits. But with the internet, it almost felt like you just had to be really, really interested in something. Like you could be like I fucking love shoelaces. Like, I'm obsessed with shoelaces. There are like 350 types of shoelaces, right? And if you were just
Yes.
limited to the 30 people in your classroom, they'll be like, oh my god, what a freak. Who cares
Right.
about who cares about shoelaces? Wear Velcro. But, but you go on the internet, you're like, I love shoelaces on Tumblr, and like 2,000 people will be like, I also love shoelaces. And one person's in France, one person's in Vietnam, one person's in New York. Like, and suddenly there's this way to like amass a great sense of like, I could have a niche, I could have a niche, and all I needed is an internet connection and a voice and an opinion on something. And right now, I think we have developed into this, we've moved past that, and we're now in this sense where there's this huge skepticism towards anything you see online. And I definitely get that. I feel like it's become so saturated with external branding and investment, because I definitely think that that was like a natural development, because anytime there's a space with eyeballs, the brands come in, you're like, all right, how can we capitalize on this? And that's just a
Yeah.
function of living in a hyper capitalistic society. But you have like a couple options, right? You can like Thoreau the whole thing and be like Henry David Thoreau and be like, I want to live in the woods, like I don't want to live in this society. Or you can be like, this is the life
Right.
I have. What can I do to survive in this life? And I think that is like something that is extremely Singaporean as well, like the sense of like, how do we survive? How do we adapt? And what does resilience look like? And I think that looks different for everybody. So for the girls in the book, um, one way they think they can move classes or move out of their life circumstances is to tap on this really new industry and see like where it can take them. And so they try and optimize it. We either try to optimize every other part of their lives to varying ends. And yeah, so that's my little TED talk.
Yeah, no, you're so right. But it's so funny because it's just the way that so much of this is almost built into society's DNA. There's a quote from the book that says, and I love this, it says, relatability wasn't as revered as pure talent was. The condemning of commercialization of personality as an intellectual failing, which of course I always think of that in terms of when I'm first railing against the Kardashians in the beginning. And I was like, I know that Skims exists now, right? I know that. I know that they have a makeup line, but they wouldn't have had that previously. And you have to understand that it came from something else.
It's interesting because I do think that in the very early days, the people who first recognized that image, your control over your own image is a kind of currency, did have first mover advantage. They did understand that the internet isn't a freewheeling place where you can be yourself totally. What goes on the internet kind of stays on the internet. It's like you have to be careful going in. And I think for me, I grew up without very much media. Like I don't think I had a TV until like I was a little older. I basically just like read books as a kid and never really had like a movie or TV watching habit. And so
Is that because of your parents' influence, or is that just because of your own interest?
a kind of combination of both. I think we just had no money. So
Yeah. Okay.
like, going to the movies was expensive,
Yeah.
and I think it was just like what was available to us, right? So when I was growing up, I think we didn't have a TV because I don't have a memory of a TV until my second sister was born. Then I remember there being a TV when she was a little older. But growing up, I just never watched it, and so I would just read books that family friends like passed down. Right?
Hmm.
That was very much just like the way I patched things together. Like, other friends, my parents' friends or like church people, when their kids grew out their clothes, they would pass it down to me, and then when I grew out of it, I'll pass it down to somebody else. Like books, whatever people had grown out of, they would just pass it down. I would just read whatever. So I read a lot of really inappropriate stuff because they didn't vet; they just gave it
Yeah.
wholesale. So I just read
Yeah.
everything I could get my hands on, and so because of that, I actually didn't grow up with like this sense of what the media was in my head, like media images, and so I do feel like I feel I've adapted to it, but I do have a slightly like uh strange relationship with it. I think there's a sense of like otherness I feel with um this idea of like you and the mirror of yourself, because I do see it too. I see now like a lot of people are like growing up in this generation are living constantly making micro adjustments to their everyday behavior almost subconsciously, because growing up with social media, instead of having it come into your life halfway through, it's almost like having this mirror installed in front of you at all times. And so you're not just, even if there's no audience, even if the audience is just yourself, you are viewing yourself as an audience would. And so you're constantly like adjusting yourself or like saying something and then taking it back and revising it and coming out with a smarter, sharper, wittier version. almost like a constant rehearsal for what it would be like to be out in public. And I think the real skill now, I mean, so maybe like 10 years ago, the real skill was realizing that your control over your image is a currency. I think now what it is realizing that that is a compartmentalized and separate version of your life. And there is a private life that you must nurture and that you must have that has to be just for you. Otherwise, very quickly, our identity or our sense of self becomes dispersed because we're giving parts of it to other people all the time for the external feedback. And I don't know if that's sustainable.
No, and it's interesting because I've said that the whole idea of celebrity has changed so much because of social media. Because, when I grew up, celebrities were, and this is a conversation again I've had with my daughter, because if I say celebrity to her, she will list 4 or 5 different YouTube personalities that she is obsessed with. And a lot of them are young women. A lot of them they're influencing, they're pushing makeup lines and these kind of things. And it's literally this simple video of like, so I'm using my highlighter number 4 on, and it's going through this whole thing and she's watching those. But I was explaining to her when I was young, a celebrity was Meryl Streep. It was Tom Cruise. It was the movie stars, the people you went into a dark theater and saw. They were the people you watched on TV. But what I think social media has done is kind of pulled a lot of those walls down and made so many people accessible in our own minds, to think like, well, I could possibly, speaking for myself now, I could possibly date Pedro Pascal. You know what I mean? But it's suddenly but it's removed so many of those barriers that what we used to think of as celebrities and who we used to think of as quote unquote movie stars, they aren't anymore because they've all just become so. Again, it speaks to what you're saying about finding this way to separate a public with a private thing. And movie stars in particular, or celebrities, they were very private. You didn't know anything about their personal lives unless a PR person was putting a statement out or something about their marriage or their divorce or something to that effect. But you didn't know the day to day. Well, now they're coming out of a Costco in their sweatpants looking like hell, about to, load in their toilet paper. We're getting access to people in unprecedented ways we never have before. And it's breaking it all down. And at the same time, taken people who have learned how to, like you said, understand their currency, but might not necessarily have a skill to back it up, but have something that is appealing to people and people want to watch, and brands understand immediately, well, let's use this person to um, capitalize.
Hmm.
I've always been fascinated just watching people, these influencers who, um, their whole life is, I'm at this hotel, I'm at this hotel going through. And when I first started to watch this, and when I say first started to, I mean like, you know, months ago when I'm really cognizant about what's happening, where I'm like, oh my God, they're being paid to do it. Because I'm like, what this life? Like, how does this sustain? What does this parlay into? How does this, for people that are arguably really young, like watching people at Coachella, the last 2 weekends, and
Hmm.
posting things from Coachella. I don't know. I think it's all fascinating. And I think it's something that the girls in the book struggle with a little bit too. There's something in the book about, you allude to social media elevating one person over another, or what is it that makes you stand out, or what is it that makes
Yeah,
you
because I
pop?
think that, I mean, this is not like a new sentiment. I think it's like very widely parroted, but social media does breed a lot of resentment because it
Yeah.
brings competitiveness and comparison into your pocket. And I do think the whole like idea of relatability is a double-edged sword, right? You're so relatable, that's why people love you. On the flip side of that, you're so relatable, people are like, well, we are the same, so why
Right.
you and not me? And I think that's something one of the girls like really has to balance, like their navigation with public public sentiment and how to dance around that. Because then it also becomes a thing where there's, there are certain things she can no longer say in wider circles. Well, that character is very private to begin with. She really only like confides in like 2 or 3 people, like her family, and does not like form strong relationships outside of that. But a lot of that's like a sense of guardedness that I find common, for people in the industry.
I'm wondering if you found when you were writing this, and I know that, people always want to find parallels between, fiction and fact.
Hmm.
Um, but as I went through the book, I couldn't help but wonder sometimes if Genevieve and Aaron were parts of Jemimah that are coming together in a way.
Well, which answer would entice people to buy the book more? We'll just go with that answer.
That is spoken like a true social media influencer.
Well, okay, so more seriously, right? I do think that for artists, your work grows out of your sensibility. And so it would
Yes,
be disingenuous to be like, well, I wrote this book about, let me think. I wrote this book about like a dolphin growing up off the coast of America, and there's nothing to do with my entire life. So even that
sure,
would encompass a sensibility that is born of the artist's
sure.
vision. And so I do think that everything in this book and everything I've ever written, right, does bloom from that same sensibility that I have like worked very hard to, like nourish and grow. And so, yeah, I guess maybe like yes and no. That would be it would be too boring if the characters kind of like totally correlated with my own experiences because my life is like objectively not that interesting. And so I had to like really navigate a lot of things in the story to like really make it more exciting, like story wise. And I think that's one of the privileges of art, right? You are able to filter like a perspective or a sensibility through the lens of these characters or these stories that you can then kind of like dilute or intensify in order to bring a point across or to bring a story across. And that I guess is what I was trying to do through the book. But I think to your question of like readers trying to find correlational points, I definitely get that and I understand why there's that sense. I have that sense too when I read other people's work or I watch like films and I just think to myself, there is a lot of debut writers have this fear that you write a book and people are going to be like, they're going to think it's me. So that is like a very valid fear, I think. But my question then is that fear, I mean, people are always going to feel that way. So is that fear large enough to then override the other fear that I have? And the other fear that I have is that there are not that many Singaporean writers. There's a growing number, but I can still count them on like one hand or like two hands. And so if I don't write an ultra local story with very specific things about the Singapore that I know and I love and that I process like through a specific lens and a contemporary period in our history, it's not going to make it into literary canon. It's not going to make it into something that I can hold and that I can hold as an objective like manifested reality, like a
Mm.
physical object when the country and the world changes so fast. And then we're just going to be left with the memories of what that period was like. And like our memories are unreliable. We are subject to nostalgia, to sentimentality. And it's not that books are not that thing, but I work the hardest that I can to make this like really as true as possible to the lives of these characters that I've created. And I've put in stuff that's very specific to things that I love. Like I put my friends' parents' businesses names in there. I named the junior college after my husband. I was like, this is not a real school. I just named it after him. I was like, I want this to go down in history. I put in like, just like little Easter eggs for my friends and my family in there that they would read and be like, oh, that's my neighborhood aunt. That's my mom's like noodle shop. And that was important to me because I don't think there's like an intellectual purity to being like, I invented everything. There is like no correlation in reality. And I think that is kind of like sometimes a defensive fear against people then accusing you of having no imagination, which to me is a moot point. Like that's not a real argument. And so that fear of like having people think, oh, is this your life? It's not great enough to overcome the fear that we would then have these stories lost to history. When you're from a small country, when you're so far from being part of the global majority in publishing, you think to yourself, if you don't write these stories, the stories of your country and of your history are going to be the stories other people tell of you. And I don't want that. That's a worse fear than people thinking this might be about her life. Like, I mean, people can have whatever opinions they want. I don't mind. They just have to buy the book, which then entitles them to have any opinion they want. They don't have to tell me those opinions. They can just have them as long as they buy the beautiful hardcover that has just come in. So,
What did somebody say? I think it was Tallulah Bankhead once said, "Well, I don't care what they're saying about me as long as they're saying it about me," and
uh,
um, and it's a little bit of that. I love the book too, though. Beyond the story, which again, I said earlier at the very start of this, and it's kind of a great way to bookend because it surprised me in so many ways. I don't know what I was originally thinking. Well, I will say this. I was originally thinking and I don't, and I please, I don't, and I hope you can hear this without, I don't mean anything, but when I first saw it, I was like,
Hmm.
will this be the chicklet? That's what I thought. And I got into it, and it couldn't have been further from that. And I found myself reading this so slowly because I didn't want it to end. And I don't always find that. And especially when I'm reading for, say, even for the podcast, and I'm just trying to get through a lot of stuff. But I put myself against some kind of weird deadline because I was like, I know I had to finish the book before I sat down with you. And yet I didn't want to go through this quickly because A, the writing was so beautiful, like as evidenced by my tabs. I just was marking so much. But also, I was so drawn to these two women and this story that I really didn't want it to end. And I didn't want to find out what was going to be the stop. So,
Oh,
anyway,
thank you. I
um,
mean, so firstly, I would never take offense to people thinking it's chick lit or whatever of that genre means because I grew up reading a lot of chick lit. You know, I feel like
and I read
any,
some of it too. Yeah. I
yeah,
mean,
shopaholic series, anybody. So like any entry into reading to me is a good entry. You know, I don't care how people get into reading as long as they do. And so, you know, love it. Would never feel any type of way about it. But number two, like, you know, I just that response means so much to me. I feel like it was Jess Walter who in his essay in the Time of Galley Slaves talks about this, where the writer's greatest material on and off the page is time. And when people describe how a book affects them or like your work affects them, it is also a way of like controlling time because they either like go, oh, I read it so quickly I couldn't get out of it. Like, you know, I couldn't put it down, which is a kind of controlling a reader's time, or I didn't want it to end, which is a way of wanting to live in time. And so that relationship to time is something that I am super like conscious of, you know, as a writer because our world like progresses and renovates so fast that we live in a time of great velocity. I think there is like a real whiplash to being in the world, which I don't think we are humanly equipped to live like. You know, I just don't think that our cells are equipped to live at this pace. And so a lot of that like kind of informed the way I framed and worked through the book. But now like, you know, hearing the way readers respond to it with their own like relationship to time, it's just like it means so much to me.
so what's next? Do you know? And if you don't want to talk about it, maybe you can't or don't know yet. That's fine. But I'm so curious. Um, I saw somewhere I thought where you were working on some short stories, but
Hmm.
curious.
Yeah, I mean, my answer changes every day depending on when you caught me. Like, if you caught me just woken up from a nap, I'm in a really good mood. I'm like, dude, I'm working on five things. And if you catch me on a bad writing day, I'm like, I'm working on nothing. So I do know what the next few books are gonna look like. I have known, I think, for a while, and it's just about which one is catching. So I'm working on several projects, and I think part of like writing is also seeing how far you go with each one before they start to feel like take on their own shape and do their own thing and
Interesting.
gain their own like acceleration. Obviously, that has been a little bit challenging in the last month because we're in the lead up to pub for this book, and so there's a lot of stuff I need to do in this real world, so I can't be immersed in that real world of like fiction
Sure.
for too long. But yeah, there's like some things I'm working on, and like mainly I think I'm just saturated in a sense of like relief because when you work on a debut for so long, like so this book, you know, I started writing in 2014. When it comes out this year, 2025, it would have been 11 years since I wrote the first word, which is nuts. And if the next one takes 11 years, I'm just gonna fall down, and perish. But you know, like I do feel like you, as an artist, like prior to releasing your first piece of work, your artistic identity can feel so codependent with this one debut, right? It can feel like if you don't finish the book, if this book isn't everything that you tried to do with it ambitiously, like artistically, you would have failed as an artist or you would not be the artist you think you are. And I feel like finishing the book and having it leave my hands and go into the publisher's hands, the copy editor, the cover designer, readers, sales reps, everything, you know, book sale, big stores, that has been really amazing for me because it just feels like I I have this new freedom to go in whatever direction I want to for my art. I I would never have to be like, am I a writer? Because, you know, like coming to your, I mean, we're bookending this, right? Coming to your first ever question. yeah, I'm a writer. The evidence is out there. So,
Yeah.
there is like, I don't have that sense anymore of, am I a writer? Maybe my new sense, my new question is, what kind of writer do I want to be moving forward? What kind of art do I want to make? What kind of questions do I want to interrogate? And I do know what my concerns are broadly, and I think it's about finding the perfect shape for them. And so I've made these plans with this book. I've started writing different projects. And I think one great thing I've learned about writing this book is that books take a really long time. So I'm trying to teach myself to be patient and not be like, well, we have to have a draft within the year. Which is not the kind of like writer I think I am anyway. I don't think I can produce like one book a year. And so I'm just, trying to take it easy and trying to show up for the book where I can. Because I feel very much like a vaguely affectionate mom where I've like made this firstborn daughter and she's now like going off into the world and doing her thing. And I feel like, great, good job. It's like that meme of that Amy Poehler, I think, with the video camera being, you're doing amazing, sweetie, keep it up. I feel like that's me. I'm like, you are doing amazing, you are a real book, you are a real girl out in the world. I'm so happy for you. And whatever I can control, like, if you're like, come and do this event or come and like talk to this book club, I would totally do it because I want to show up for my firstborn. But I
Yeah.
don't think
Yeah.
that I can control anything else about that, how readers take it, who her readers are, who she finally resonates with. Um, all of that is out of my control and does not objectively change anything in the book. The book that I've written is always going to be the book. The words are always going to be the same words, and so the reception is like a different part of the book's life that is not really my kind of my business, I think.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
that like has been really wonderful because then I feel like I can like feel very affectionate to this book going out and then work on the next one. Turn my attention to my children who need more attention because they are in formation.
Exactly. I love that. And find out which one of your children is the most ambitious towards their creator
Mm-hmm.
and needs it first. Well, I think she's just beautiful, and I'm so excited to see what happens with both her and you. I mean, again, I feel so lucky and privileged to be sitting with you today because um, when I was going through this, I was like, wow, this is it's just a spectacular book to me. So congratulations on all of it. I'm thrilled for you.
Well, thank you so, so, so much. Like, this is so lovely. And hearing you talk about the book, really, it's just, it's hard for me to put into words, which is ironic, but I just do feel like the feeling is too big for me.
I get
Because,
it.
yeah, it's, for the longest time, just finishing the book was the dream. So everything beyond that, it's beyond my wildest dreams already. It's hard to step into that feeling, I think. Yeah.
Well, and I
But it's a good
feel
one.
yeah, no,
Good feeling.
100%. It's like one of the reasons I started this podcast is because I wanted the opportunity to talk to writers who are about to embark on a journey and their first kind of work comes out. And that's one of the reasons that when I moved into this podcast, I wanted to really focus on debut authors because so many of my favorite books last year were debuts. Because I think there's so many voices that needed to be amplified that weren't necessarily going to be amplified in some ways. And you are like a prime example of just I'm so happy this book is out there. I'm so happy for people to experience you, I should say, and your work. And I just think it's great. So
Thank
congratulations.
you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.